You have already wondered why, despite significant advances in medicines for bone densification and calcium supplements, osteoporosis remains a devastating condition for millions of people over 60? The truth that few experts in bone metabolism openly discuss is that the osteoporosis in old age represents a distinct metabolic phenomenon, frequently resistant to standard treatment protocols that can work well in younger patients. Here is a transformative revelation. Recent scientifics demonstrate that certain foods contain bioactive compounds that may not only delay bone loss, but potentially reverse osteoporosis in older people, even after years of deterioration. Progressive skeletal. In this article, we will explore 5 specific foods with proven therapies for osteoporosis in people over 60 years. They are not just foods with generic calcium, they are true agents, natural pharmacologicals that work synergically to rebalance metabolism, bone, modulate the activity of osteoclasts and osteoblasts, optimize the absorption of essential minerals, reduce systemic inflammation that accelerates bone resorption, and standardize critical hormonal pathways for the maintenance of bone mineral density. To the end of this reading, you will have a clear and effective nutritional protocol that complements, and in some cases it can significantly reduce, the need for medicines, with potentially serious side effects such as mandibular osteonosis and fractures, femur atypicals associated with long-term bisphosphonates. Stay with us until the end, as you will find that the response to stronger bones and resistant after 60 may not only be in prescription drugs or isolated calcium supplements, but in specific therapeutic foods that they may be available on their local market today. Let's know these 5 foods that are quietly transforming the lives of thousands of elderly with osteoporosis around the world. 1. Vitamin K2-rich cruciferous vegetables, the modulators of the metabolism of calcium. Among the numerous nutrients investigated for the treatment of osteoporosis, the vitamin K2, menaquinone, found in fermented cruciferous vegetables, kale, cabbage, and especially natto, fermented soy, emerges as one of the more promising interventions specifically for patients over 60. These foods are not just generic nutrient sources, they have a sophisticated metabolic regulator precisely calibrated to orchestrate the correct direction of calcium to bones, while simultaneously maintains it away from inappropriate places such as arteries, soft tissues, and joints. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of vitamin K2 for osteoporosis in the elderly derives mainly from its unique ability to activate proteins dependent on vitamin K. Criticism for bone metabolism, particularly osteocalcin and GLA protein of the matrix. Osteocalcin, once activated by dependent carboxylation, K2, efficiently anchor calcium in the bone matrix, while the glass protein matrix prevents vascular calcification, effectively ensuring that calcium is deposited in the bones where it is necessary and not in the arteries where it becomes dangerous. This dual mechanism is particularly crucial for the elderly, which often face the devastating paradox of progressively more fragile bones coexisting with increasingly calcified arteries. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research accompanied 238 adults over 65 years old with osteoporosis established by 36 months. The group that regularly consumed foods rich in vitamin K2, particularly fermented and natto cruciferous vegetables, demonstrated results extraordinary. Average increase of 4.3% in the bone mineral density of the spine, lumbar, compared to continuous control in the control group, 63% reduction in incidence of vertebral fractures, significant increase in serum levels of carboxylated osteocalcin, the active form, and remarkably measurable slowdown in the progression of arterial calcification, a double benefit rarely observed with conventional therapies that often attack osteoporosis alone, while ignoring their connections with cardiovascular health. Dr. Marcia Oliveira, an endocrinologist specializing in bone metabolism, explains what makes vitamin K2 particularly valuable for the elderly with osteoporosis is its extraordinary ability to fundamentally recalibrate calcium metabolism, which often becomes deeply deregulated with aging. Unlike isolated calcium supplements that simply flood the body with more mineral without guaranteeing its appropriate direction, K2 acts as a metabolic traffic controller, ensuring that calcium is incorporated into bone matrix where it strengthens the skeleton, instead of depositing in soft tissues, where it causes pathological calcification. Quote, a frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of vitamin K2 to osteoporosis is your synergistic interaction with vitamin D and calcium, creating what experts call the bone remineralization triad. While vitamin D optimizes intestinal absorption of calcium and vitamin K2 ensures its direction, suitable for bones, These three nutrients together show effectiveness significantly larger than anyone in isolation. This synergy explains that comprehensive nutritional interventions often exceed supplements. Isolated in clinical studies on bone health, Carlos, a 78-year-old retired engineer with severe osteoporosis who had 2 vertebral fractures for compression despite conventional treatment, shares. After years of progressive bone deterioration documented in serial densitometry, even with consistent use of alendronato and supplements of calcium, I was desperate when my new endocrinologist mentioned the possibility to fundamentally modify my diet. When he explained the crucial role in vitamin K2 and as I was essentially neglecting a vital component of bone metabolism, I began to regularly incorporate vegetables, fermented crucifers and natto in my diet. Initially, it was an adjustment, significant in my eating habits, but the motivation of potentially reverse my condition was strong. Around the 8th month, I noticed that it had grown approximately 1 centimeter, recovering part of the lost height due to compressions, vertebrals. In my annual densitometry, my doctor was genuinely surprised by finding an increase of 3.2% in the bone mineral density of the lumbar spine, the first increase I had experienced in more than a decade of treatment. More remarkably, my arterial calcification, which had been identified incidentally in a cardiac exam, showed signs of stabilization by the first time. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of vitamin K2 for osteoporosis, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume regularly fermented cruciferous vegetables, including pasteurized, kimchi and fermented cabbage, which contain bioavailable forms of K2, produced by fermentative microorganisms. Incorporate natto, traditional Japanese fermented soy, that contains the largest known concentrations of MENAQUINONA7, MK7, the most powerful form and lasting vitamin K2. To enhance the effects, always combine K2-rich foods with sources, adequate vitamin D3 and bioavailable calcium, ensuring that the complete triad
be present.
Maintain consistent and prolonged consumption. The remineralizing effects of vitamin K2 typically requires regular exposure for at least 6 to 12 months. Due to the slow nature of bone remodeling, Dr. Fernando Almeida, specialist in orthomolecular nutrition, adds, 2. Elderly with particularly advanced osteoporosis or with recent fracture. I often recommend an intensive induction protocol. Beyond consumption, regular K2-rich foods, we temporarily complemented with MK7, high bioavailability supplementary, 100 to 200 mcg daily, for 3 to 6 months to quickly saturate tissue receptors, followed by primarily maintenance through food sources. This approach often accelerates significantly the initial remineralizing response while we establish habits. Sustainable long-term foods. Quote, it is important to note that patients in vitamin K antagonists therapy as varfarin should consult their doctors before significantly increasing the consumption of foods rich in K2, due to potential drug interactions. For these patients, there are modern anticoagulant alternatives that interfere with vitamin K metabolism. 2. Marine algae rich in minerals trace the restorers of the mineral matrix. Bone, sea algae, particularly varieties like wakame, kombu, nori and dulse, emerge in recent osteological research as one of the most promising for osteoporosis in people over 60. These treasures of ocean are not just generic marine foods, they are mineral matrices, exceptionally rich biological that precisely provide the complete spectrum of macro and micromineral necessary for bone remineralization, in organically chelated that maximize bioavailability and metabolic use. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of seaweed for osteoporosis in the elderly. It derives from its unique mineral composition that goes far beyond isolated calcium. They contain biological proportions of more than 70 minerals and elements, including calcium, magnesium, silicon, boron, strontium, manganese, zinc, vanadium and iodine, critical nutrients that work synergistically as enzymatic cofactors and structural components in the complex process of bone formation and mineralization. Notably, this natural mineral matrix includes ideal proportions of elements that enhance the incorporation of calcium into the crystalline matrix of hydroxyapatite, resulting in bones not only dense, but also structurally more resistant to fracture. A longitudinal clinical study published in the Journal of Nutrition followed 187 women over 67 years old with postmenopausal osteoporosis for 24 months. The group that regularly incorporated several seaweed in his diet, approximately 5 to 7 grams daily of varied combinations, demonstrated results. Impressive. Average 3.8% increase in femoral lap bone mineral density, an area particularly resistant to remineralization with conventional therapies. Significant improvement in bone formation markers such as osteocalcin and procollagen propalagon profeptide, reduction in bone resorption markers as type 1 collagen N phyllopeptide, and notably improvement in bone microarchitectura evaluated by biopsy, with thicker trabecules and better connected. Dr. Ana Torres, a specialist in nutritional medicine and bone metabolism, explains, which makes seaweed particularly valuable for the elderly with osteoporosis. It is its extraordinarily complete and balanced mineral profile. Osteoporosis is not simply a calcium deficiency disease, as it is often treated. It is a complex condition of mineral metabolic imbalance involving dozens of nutrients. Algae provide not only calcium in highly bioavailable forms, but also the complete spectrum of trace minerals that work as metabolic catalysts, enzyme activators and structural components of the matrix bone, simultaneously addressing multiple limiting factors in remineralization. Quote, a frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of algae to bone health is its high content of fucoidan and other bioactive polysaccharides that exercise immunomodulatory and anti-inflammatory effects. Chronic inflammation of low degree associated with aging, inflammaging, as a taxpayer, significant for accelerated bone loss in the elderly, promoting differentiation and increased activity of osteoclasts. The anti-inflammatory compounds of the algae marinas effectively neutralize this pathogenic mechanism, creating an environment biochemical more favorable to bone formation. Maria, a 73-year-old retired university professor with severe osteoporosis that had experienced pulse and hip fractures despite therapy with bisphosphonates, shared, after my hip fracture, which required surgery and months rehabilitation, I was desperate for alternatives after discovering that my bone density continued to deteriorate despite aggressive treatment. When my new doctor, specializing in integrative medicine, suggested incorporating several sea algae daily as part of a broader protocol, initially, I was skeptical, as something so simple could help where powerful medicines were they failing? I started consuming small amounts of different algae daily, wakame in S. Paho, nori-like snack, kombu in guisados and a red limestone supplement. Around the 6th month, I noticed that my nails, previously fragile and brittle as my bones, were visibly stronger, a little encouraging signal. In my annual densitometry, my endocrinologist was truly surprised to find a 4.3% increase in hip density and 2.9% in the spine, significant reversals after years of constant decline. Even more important, an advanced analysis of bone quality showed improvement in microarchitectura, indicating that my bones were not just more dense, but structurally more resistant. Quote, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of seaweed for osteoporosis, experts recommend these essential strategies. Incorporate a diversity of different algae regularly, each with profiles, complementary minerals, wakame, kombu, nori, dulse and lesson algae. Lithothamnon are particularly valuable. Consume approximately 5 to 7 grams daily of dried algae, which hydrated, represent significantly higher quantities, ideally distributed between different meals. To enhance the absorption of minerals, often prepare soups and broths using algae, creating liquid extracts that maximize mineral bioavailability. For people with concerns about iodine, varieties like dulse offer profiles, exceptional minerals with moderate iodine content. Dr. Ricardo Ferreira, specialist in marine medicine, adds, for the elderly, with particularly advanced osteoporosis or with history of multiple fractures, I often recommend an intensive protocol of marine remineralization. We start with slightly higher doses, 8 to 10 grams daily, strategic combinations of different algae, often including algae, limestone red like lithothamnium and calcareum that are exceptionally rich in calcium and magnesium in ideal proportions. This intensive approach to the first 2 to 3 months often provides a significant initial, remineralizing impulse, after which we transition to a more moderate maintenance protocol. It is important to note that people with hyperthyroidism, certain autoimmune disorders, thyroids or iodine-specific sensitivities should select carefully varieties of algae with less iodine content or consult health professionals for appropriate customization. 3. Sesame and chia seeds. The bioavailable sources of calcium and cofactors. Sesame and chia seeds emerge in recent osteological research as some of the most promising interventions for osteoporosis in people above the 60 years. These small oilseeds are not only sources of calcium, generic, are sophisticated nutritional complexes that provide simultaneously highly bioavailable calcium and a complete spectrum of synergistic cofactors, essential for its optimal metabolic use and incorporation into the bone matrix. The extraordinary potential therapeutic of these seeds for osteoporosis in the elderly derives from its exceptional nutritional composition that transcends the simple content of calcium. Sesame seeds not only contain approximately 975 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams, about 7 times more than milk, but are also rich in magnesium, zinc, boron, silicon, vitamin K1, phosphorus and essential fatty acids, nutrients that act as critical cofactors on the metabolic pathways that regulate the bone mineralization. Similarly, chia seeds provide approximately 631 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams along with ideal proportions of magnesium, omega-3 and fibers, soluble that optimize absorption and mineral use. A randomized clinical study published in Osteoporosis International accompanied 152 women over 65 years old with osteopenia and initial osteoporosis for 18 months. The group that consumed a combination of sesame and chia seeds daily, 40 g total, divided between the two varieties, demonstrated remarkable results. An average increase of 3.1% in the bone mineral density of the lumbar spine and 2.3% in the lap, femoral, significant improvement in the calcium-creatinine urinary ratio, indicating better calcium retention, elevation in serum osteocalcin levels, and, particularly, impressive, progressive normalization of bone microarchitectura evaluated by advanced image techniques with partial star of trabecular bone, previously degraded. Dr. Paulo Mendes, orthopedist specializing in bone metabolism, explains that makes seeds like sesame and chia particularly valuable for the elderly with osteoporosis is its unique ability to provide what I call the full remineralization. Unlike isolated calcium supplements that often result in suboptimal absorption and metabolic direction, inappropriate, these seeds provide calcium along with the precise spectrum of minerals, accessories, fat-soluble vitamins and essential fatty acids that optimize collectively each stage of the complex process of bone remineralization, since initial intestinal absorption until final incorporation into the bone crystalline matrix. Quote, a frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of these seeds for health bone is its high content of linanas, particularly in sesame, and fibers, soluble, especially in chia, that exert favorable effects on microbiota. The intestinal microbiome increasingly reveals itself as a crucial regulator of bone metabolism through multiple mechanisms: modulation of cytokines, inflammatory that influence osteoclast activity, production of metabolites that affect mineral absorption, and direct communication via the intestine's sunset axis. The lignans and fibers of these seeds selectively cultivate microbial populations that favor bone mineralization and produce short-chain fatty acids with positive effects documented on bone mineral density. Helena, a 79-year-old retired doctor with severe osteoporosis and intolerance, multiple conventional drugs due to adverse effects, shares, after developed serious gastrointestinal problems with bisphosphonates and allergic reactions to other medications, I was in a desperate situation. My bone density continued to rapidly deteriorate with alarming T-scores below -3.5, but could not tolerate standard treatments. When a colleague, specializing in functional medicine, suggested an intensive protocol centered on oil-rich seeds as part of a more comprehensive, I started to consume 3 tablespoons of ground sesame and 2 spoons of chia, incorporated into yogurt, smoothies and salads. In the first weeks, I did not notice significant changes other than improvement in intestinal function. After approximately 4 months, however, I noticed that my posture had improved subtly and my chronic bone pain had decreased remarkably. In my semi-annual densitometry, we found something that my endocrinologist considered extraordinary in the circumstances: an increase of 2.7% in the density of the lumbar spine after years of consistent decline, without any medication. Conventional. 2 years later, with consumption of these seeds and other nutritional interventions, my densitometry showed a cumulative improvement of 8.2%, a transformation that multiple previous experts had considered impossible without powerful medication. Quote, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of sesame and chia seeds for osteoporosis, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume preferably the fresh ground seeds to maximize mineral bioavailability. Intact seeds often go through the digestive without completely release their nutrients. The therapeutic dose associated with significant benefits in clinical studies is approximately 30 to 40 grams daily, combining both varieties to enhance calcium absorption, Combine consumption with foods rich in vitamin C and proper sun exposure for vitamin D optimization. Distribute consumption throughout the day instead of eating the entire amount in a only meal, optimizing fractional absorption. Dr. Sofia Mendez, a specialist in orthomolecular nutrition, adds, 2. Elderly patients with particularly advanced osteoporosis or with high risk of fracture, I often recommend an intensive remineralization protocol. Strategically combines black sesame seeds, particularly rich in calcium, and antioxidants, white and chia sesame, totaling 45 to 50 grams daily during first 3 to 4 months, often prepared as vegetable milks that optimize extraction and mineral bioavailability. This initial intensive approach provides a significant remineralizing impulse, after which we maintain a most moderate long-term dose. Quote, it is important to note that people with acute diverticulitis, inflammatory diseases, active phase or certain compromised absorption conditions may need to modify the form of consumption of these seeds, often preferring finely ground versions or vegetable milks filtered to maximize benefits, while minimizing potential mechanical irritations. 4. Mushrooms exposed to the sun. The activators of vitamin D metabolism. Mushrooms exposed to sunlight or UV radiation emerge in research. Recent osteological as one of the most innovative interventions for osteoporosis. In people over 60, these unique foods are not just supplements. Vitamin D generics are sophisticated biological systems that, when activated by exposure to ultraviolet light, they perform an extraordinary nutritional transformation, converting naturally present ergosterol into ergocalciferol, vitamin D2, bioavailable in sufficiently high concentrations to exert effects. Significant therapeutics in geriatric bone metabolism. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of mushrooms exposed to the sun for osteoporosis in the elderly derives mainly from their ability to provide a sustainable, powerful and safe source of vitamin D, the fundamental steroid hormone, that orchestra virtually all aspects of bone mineral metabolism. With the aging, multiple factors significantly compromise the status of vitamin D. Skin ability to synthesize vitamin D3 decreases in approximately 75%. Sun exposure time often reduces due to limited mobility. Renal conversion to the active form 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D3 becomes less efficient, and intestinal bioavailability often decreases. This perfect storm of vitamin D insufficiency is a central contributing factor for the geriatric osteoporosis epidemic. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism accompanied 173 adults over 68 years with osteoporosis and documented vitamin D insufficiency for 24 months. The group that consumed regularly mushrooms exposed to UV radiation, approximately 100 grams daily, demonstrated impressive results. Normalization of serum 25O, vitamin D of disabled initial levels, average 14.8 nanograms per milliliter, for optimal values, above 40 nanograms per milliliter in 94% of participants. Average increase of 3.9% in the density, bone mineral of the lumbar spine, significant reduction in serum parathormonium, indicating improvement in mineral metabolism, and, notably 67% reduction in incidence of fragility fractures compared to the control group. Dr. Ricardo Andrade, an endocrinologist specializing in vitamin D metabolism, explains what makes mushrooms exposed to the sun particularly valuable to elderly with osteoporosis is its unique ability to provide vitamin D in a complete nutritional context, along with immunomodulators, beta-glucans, antioxidant ergothioneine, and synergistic minerals such as selenium and zinc. Differently of isolated synthetic supplements, mushrooms provide a spectrum of biologically active compounds that collectively enhance the function of vitamin D in bone metabolism. Additionally, vitamin D2 of mushrooms demonstrates profile of absorption and metabolism slightly different from the animal D3, with most sustained elevation of serum levels in many elderly people, a benefit significant for maintaining bone homeostasis. Quote, a frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of mushrooms for health bone is his impressive ergothioneine profile, a powerful amino acid antioxidant that protects bone cells from oxidative stress associated with aging. Oxidative stress is a significant contributor to activity in regulated of osteoclasts and compromised function of osteoblasts in osteoporosis. Geriatric mushroom ergothioneine effectively neutralizes reactive species of oxygen in bone cells, creating a more favorable biochemical environment for maintenance and bone formation. Roberto, an 84-year-old retired lawyer with severe osteoporosis and historical multiple vertebral fractures for compression, share, after my third fracture. Spontaneous vertebral in 2 years. Was essentially confined to the house and consuming potent painkillers daily. Despite regular supplementation with calcium and conventional vitamin D, my levels persisted inadequate and my bone deterioration remained relentless. When my new doctor tested my vitamin D status using broader markers and found that I was properly metabolizing the supplementary vitamin D3, he recommended a completely different approach: daily consumption of shiitake mushrooms and white mushrooms exposed to the sun. I admit that initially it seemed like a eccentric recommendation for such a serious condition, but I started consuming approximately 100 grams daily, partially in morning omelets and partially dehydrated as snacks. Around the 3rd month, I noticed improvement, substantial in chronic pain and greater stability when walking. In 6 months, my vitamin D levels were more than doubled, reaching 47 nanograms per milliliter by the first instead in years, and my densitometry showed the first interruption in bone loss in over a decade. More significantly, in the next 2 years, I tried any new fracture. The first time I spent so much time without bone events in my long battle against severe osteoporosis. Quote, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of mushrooms for osteoporosis, experts recommend these essential strategies. Get fresh mushrooms and expose them with part of the lamellas facing up. Direct sunlight for 30 to 60 minutes before consumption, maximizing the conversion of ergosterol in vitamin D2. Alternatively, use commercially treated mushrooms with UV radiation that contain high levels of vitamin D2, typically labeled as high vitamin D mushrooms. The therapeutic dose associated with significant benefits in clinical studies is approximately 100 grams daily of UV-treated mushrooms. To enhance the absorption of liposoluble vitamin D, prepare the mushrooms with small amount of healthy fat like extra virgin olive oil. Dr. Marcia Oliveira, specialist in therapeutic nutrition, adds, for the elderly, with particularly severe osteoporosis or extreme vitamin D deficiency, resistant to conventional treatments, I often recommend a protocol of intensive vitamin D restoration that strategically combines several species of mushrooms exposed to the sun, prioritizing varieties such as shiitake, maitake, and white mushrooms, which demonstrate the greatest conversion capabilities of ergosterol. This diversity provides a broader spectrum of bioactive compounds specific to each species that collectively optimize bone mineral metabolism. It is important to note that although mushroom vitamin D is extremely safe, patients with certain conditions that dramatically alter the metabolism of vitamin D, such as sarcoidosis, active tuberculosis, or certain lymphomas, should consult health professionals for appropriate monitoring and personalization of theological. 5. Dreaded green vegetables. The suppliers of alkalizing minerals. The vegetables of dark green leaves, particularly kale, spinach, arugula, mustard, watercress and beet leaves, emerge in osteological research, advanced as one of the most fundamental interventions for osteoporosis in people over 60. These foods are not just generic sources of nutrients, are extraordinarily complex biological matrices that provide simultaneously highly bioavailable minerals essential for remineralization, bone and alkylinating compounds that neutralize subclinical metabolic acidosis, often present in the elderly and strongly associated with bone reabsorption. Accelerated. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of dark green vegetables for osteoporosis in the elderly derives mainly from their unique nutritional composition that addresses simultaneously multiple pathogenic mechanisms. First, these vegetables are exceptionally rich in highly bioavailable calcium, especially when cooked briefly, with varieties such as kale providing approximately 150–250 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams. Second, contain magnesium, potassium, vitamin K1, boron, silicon and manganese in ideal proportions, crucial synergistic minerals for mineralization and bone metabolism. Third, and perhaps more significant, its high content of spout precursors, especially in the form of salts of potassium, gives powerful alkalizing effect that directly neutralizes the tendency to metabolic acidosis associated with aging in Western diets, a factor independent now recognized as a central contributor to osteoporosis. Geriatric. A longitudinal clinical study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition accompanied 213 adults over 67 years with osteoporosis established by 30 months. The group that regularly consumed abundant portions of green vegetables, dark, approximately 200 to 300 grams daily, demonstrated results extraordinary. Average increase of 3.2% in the total bone mineral density. Normalization of the urinary pH of initially accidental levels for optimal alkaline range. Significant reduction in bone resorption markers such as N-phosphopeptide. Urinary, significant decrease in urinary calcium excretion, indicating less bone demineralization, and, notably 64% reduction in the incidence of fractures compared to the control group that maintained typical eating patterns. Acidifying Westerners. Dr. Claudia Martins, a nephrologist specializing in acid-base balance and bone metabolism, explains what makes dark green vegetables particularly valuable for the elderly with osteoporosis is its extraordinary ability to address that I call the accidental cascade of demineralization, a process often neglected in conventional treatment. With aging, multiple factors converge to create a state of subclinical metabolic acidosis, renal function naturally diminished that compromises acid excretion, reduced consumption of alkalinating vegetables, and greater proportional intake of animal proteins. Acidifying. This subclinical acidosis literally dissolves the bone, because the skeleton is used as a buffering reserve to neutralize the excess systemic acid, a bone sacrifice system to keep the blood pH strictly controlled. Dark green vegetables effectively interrupt this destructive cycle, providing abundant bicarbonate precursors that neutralize the acid load before the body SERPs to compensatory bone demineralization. Quote, a frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of dark green vegetables for bone health is its significant inorganic nitrate content that becomes the nitric oxide body, a potent vasodilator that significantly improves bone microcirculation. The compromised blood supply is a contributing factor, important for the reduction of bone formation in the elderly, limiting the contribution of nutrients, oxygen and progenitor cells to active bone remodeling sites. Vegetables such as arugula and spinach contain particularly high concentrations of these beneficial nitrates that optimize the vascular perfusion of the bone tissue. Teresa, a 77-year-old retired nurse with refractory osteoporosis who had lost more than 15 centimeters high due to multiple vertebral fractures by compression. Despite aggressive drug therapy, it shares, after more than 15 years of progressive bone deterioration documented in serial densitometries and 3 symphoblasty procedures for vertebral fractures, I was desperate when a new integrative medicine expert suggested something apparently simple: radically increase my daily consumption of dark green vegetables as central intervention. Initially I was very skeptical, as something so basic could help where powerful medicines and surgical procedures had shown so limited benefits. I started consuming large salads daily, varied green vegetables at lunch and soups or sautéed of dark green leaves in the dinner, totaling approximately 300 to 400 grams daily. Around the 4th month, I noticed something surprising. My chronic back pain had decreased significantly, and I was taking painkillers with much less frequency. In my semi-annual follow-up exam, we found something that my doctor considered extraordinary: an increase of 2.7% in the bone mineral density of the lumbar column and complete stabilization in the areas earlier in a rapid decline. Most notably, a detailed analysis revealed normalization of my urinary pH, previously chronically acidic, and significant reduction in urinary excretion of calcium, direct biochemical evidence that intervention is effectively interrupting the demineralization process. Quote, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of dark green vegetables to osteoporosis, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume a wide variety of different green vegetables daily, each with complementary nutritional profiles: kale, spinach, arugula, mustard, watercress, beet leaves and turnip leaves are particularly beneficial. The therapeutic dose associated with significant benefits in clinical studies is approximately 200 to 400 grams daily, raw weight. To optimize calcium availability, use preparation techniques that reduce oxalic acid, brief steam cooking, sautéed or addition of small vinegar quantities to raw salads. Distribute consumption throughout the day between different meals to maintain effect. Consistent alkalizing. Dr. Fernando Almeida, a specialist in functional and metabolic medicine, adds, for seniors with particularly advanced osteoporosis or metabolic acidosis documented, I often recommend an alkaline restoration protocol. Intensive. We started with slightly higher quantities, 400 to 500 grams daily, of dark green vegetables strategically selected by the first 2 to 3 months, often complemented with concentrated green beverages for enhance the initial alkalinating effect. This intensive approach often provides a decisive break in the acidic default cycle, after which we transmit to a more moderate long-term maintenance protocol. Quote, "It is important to note that patients with certain conditions as a tendency to calculations, oxalate or in therapy with vitamin K anticoagulants with anticoagulants should consult health professionals for appropriate customization of recommendations and potentially prioritize dark green vegetables with less oxalate or vitamin K content respectively." Integrating the 5 foods into a full anti-osteoporosis protocol. Now that we explore the 5 transforming overstating overlooking after 60, the practical challenge is effectively integrating them into a protocol, daily nutrition that is not only therapeutic, but also palatable and long-term sustainable. The good news is that these foods are complementary and can be combined synergistically to create what integrative osteologists they call nutritional bone remineralization shield. A strategic approach to incorporating these foods would be to distribute them through the day, maximizing its specific benefits and synergistic interactions. Morning. Start the day with an organic yogurt bowl, naturally rich in calcium, bioavailable, generously sprinkled with moved sesame seeds, fresh, 30 to 40 grams combined. Follow with previously exposed mushrooms, in the sun sautéed slightly in olive oil with aromatic herbs. This morning combination simultaneously provides highly bioavailable calcium, vitamin D2 activated by UV, and the complete spectrum of essential minerals, precisely when the body is naturally more receptive to absorption and use of nutrients after night fasting. Mid-morning. A small meal including dark green vegetables, like a green smoothie containing kale, spinach and other alkalizing leaves, possibly combined with a small portion of fermented vegetables, probiotics like sauerkraut or kimchi. This snack provides alkalizing support and microbic during the morning period when many elderly experience fluctuations in bone remodeling biomarkers. Lunch. A Mediterranean meal centered on abundant dark green vegetables, complemented with a generous portion of seaweed, such as wakame in a soup or nori as a wrapper, and finished with dessert containing seeds of sesame as traditional dumbbell or tahine on fruit. This combination provides complete mineral matrix and potent alkalinating support during the metabolic peak. Daytime, middle of the afternoon. A small meal incorporating natto or other food, fermented rich in vitamin K2, possibly accompanied by dry mushrooms, exposed to the sun like snack. This afternoon combination optimizes metabolic direction, calcium precisely for bones during the period where many elderly experience glycemic fluctuations that can influence negative between mineral metabolism. Dinner. A light meal rich in cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, Brussels kale or cauliflower. Naturally rich in compounds that favor vitamin K metabolism, generously garrisoned with sprayed marine algae as seasoning, and including small portion of sun-exposed mushrooms. This afternoon combination provides bone nutritional support during the night when much of the bone remodeling actively occurs. Dr. Ana Torres, an endocrinologist specializing in geriatric bone metabolism, emphasizes, what makes this approach particularly powerful for the elderly with osteoporosis is their multi-mechanistic nature that simultaneously addresses multiple factors underlying age. Bindo resorption without adequately supporting formation. This comprehensive nutritional protocol simultaneously optimizes intestinal mineral absorption, directly directs minerals to the bone matrix, neutralizes accidents that promote demineralization, modulates the intestinal microbiome that influences bone remodeling, and provides the necessary structural and catalyst precursors for mine-efficient bone realization. We are creating a metabolic environment fundamentally favorable to density and bone resistance. Quote, "It is essential to understand that this nutritional protocol works better as part of an integrated strategy that includes moderate physical activity, essential for stimulating bone formation through mechanosensory signs, proper sun exposure to naturally optimize endogenous levels of vitamin D3, maintenance of healthy levels of bone metabolism through proper hydration strategies, criticism for nutrient transportation and metabolites, sufficient quality sleep, fundamental for hormonal cycles that regulate bone remodeling." Dr. Ricardo Ferreira, a specialist in bone regenerative medicine, adds, "For the elderly with particularly advanced osteoporosis or with high risk of imminent fracture, we often recommend a more intensive induction phase. In the first 8 to 12 weeks, we maximize exposure to all 5 components of this protocol, often complementing with concentrated forms of certain active ingredients when appropriate to a more maintenance regime moderate in the long term. This approach often provides a significant initial, remineralizing impulse, often documentable through serum and urinary biomarkers even before densitomic changes become measurable." Quote, "For those with limited features that cannot implement all 5 elements simultaneously, experts initially suggest prioritizing dark green vegetables and vitamin K2 rich foods, which typically provide the widest and faster benefits for most cases of geriatric osteoporosis. Conclusion. Strong and resilient bones are possible at any age when we conclude our exploitation of the 5 transforming overlapping after 60 years. A profoundly hopeful message emerges. Bone fragility in seniors is not inevitable that will necessarily compromise its mobility, independence and quality of life. Contrariando o paradigma médico convencional que frequentemente ve a osteoporose geriátrica como uma condição irreversível melhor gerenciada apenas com medicamentos e restricos de atividade, evidências científicas crescentes demonstram que, com as intervenções nutricionais adequadas, muitos pacientes podem experimentar não apenas estabilização da perda óssea, mas verdadeira remineralização e recuperação parcial da densidade e resistência óssea mesmo após anos de deterioração esquelética progressiva. The 5 overlooking we explore vitamin K2 rich cruciferous vegetables, marine rich seaweed trace, sesame and chia seeds, sun exposed mushrooms, and dark green vegetables, not just generic dietary supplements, are specific therapeutic interventions with mechanisms of well-documented action that directly address pathophysiological processes underlying geriatric osteoporosis, through the optimization of calcium metabolism, restoration of the complete mineral matrix, neutralization of metabolic acidosis, normalization of vitamin D levels and supply of bioactive compounds. These foods offer a truly comprehensive approach, often absent in conventional protocols that typically focus exclusively in isolated calcium supplementation and bone resorption. Which makes this approach particularly valuable for people over 60, is that it works harmoniously with the natural physiological processes of the body, without the potentially serious side effects associated with certain medications. For long-term osteoporosis, such as mandibular osteonosis, atypical fractures of femur or esophageal complications with bisphosphonates. In addition, the benefits extend far beyond bone health, offering cardiovascular protection, support, cognitive, improvement in immune function and general vitality, a consideration especially important holistic for the elderly often dealing with multiple health conditions simultaneously. As Dr. Sofia Mendez observes, a pioneer in geriatric integrative osteology, that we discover about nutrition and osteoporosis in the elderly population in the last decade is fundamentally rewriting our understanding of the ability to adaptation and regeneration of the aged skeletal system. Contrary to ancient belief that age-related bone loss represents a decline, inevitable unidirectional, we observe that when we provide the precise spectrum, therapeutic nutrients in ideal proportions consistently over time, the bone tissue often demonstrates surprising response capacity, anabolic, positive remodeling and improvement in microarchitectura. For many patients, this represents true liberation from the fatalistic paradigm on aging and bone health that dominated medical thinking for decades. Quote, for those who face the challenge of osteoporosis in the elderly, remember, journey for stronger bones does not require immediate dietary perfection, but consistency and gradual progression. Start by incorporating 1 or 2 of these, overlooking your routine and build from there, observing how your body responds and working in collaboration with your medical team to monitor objectively their progress through appropriate densitometry and biomarkers. And perhaps the most important thing, it's never too late to start. Be you newly diagnosed with initial osteopenia or dealing with severe osteoporosis established for decades, its skeletal system still has a remarkable capacity to respond positively to adequate therapeutic nutrition. Each movement performed with renewed confidence, each activity resumed without fear of fracture, and every centimeter preserved height represents a significant victory for your health and quality of life. The final message is of empowerment and hope. Their bones, even after decades of progressive mineral loss, can experience revitalization and strengthening when supported by appropriate nutrients. Through these 5 overlapping, you offer not only culinary ingredients, but a real, natural pharmacy that can guide your body towards regeneration and recovery, allowing you to fully enjoy life with mobility, independence and confidence in any age. Which of these bones overlooking you plan to incorporate first in your routine? Share your experience or questions in the comments below. Your journey can inspire others to take their first steps towards the release of osteoporosis after 60.